Hello and welcome to Fat Kid Fit Bod. I'm your friendly neighborhood trainer, Noah Sage Zimmerman. I'm a professional personal trainer based in Los Angeles, California, and I help men and women build bodies that look and feel strong. This podcast will focus not just on physical health, but also mental health and the challenges that make it hard to prioritize your health. I'm here to tell you how you can eat delicious meals, travel, work, build strong relationships, be social, and live the life you want, all while building and maintaining a body you love. With the help of other professionals and people that prioritize health, I'm giving away my best practices and reviewing emerging research in health and fitness so you can feel your best, look your best, and live life to the fullest. All right, thank you guys. We're here with Fat Kid Fit Bod episode 3. Today's guest is George Augusto. He's co-founder and artistic director of women's lifestyle brand STAUD, which launched in 2016. He's also a partner in a restaurant, bakery, and caterer Kitchen Mouse located in Highland Park, a native Angelino born in Echo Park, and he currently lives in Mountain, Washington, California. George, welcome to the podcast. All right, guys, calm down. How you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Noah.
Of course. George is also a client of mine. And one of the great things about having clients that I see multiple times a week is they become good friends as well. So George, when I asked him to be on this podcast, he jumped at the opportunity to help me out. And I always have a tendency to ask you business advice because not only have you launched one company, but you founded 3, if I'm correct?
Let's just say 2 that are up and running. I mean, there's been numerous that have, gone bust. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so yeah, if you're not failing, so you're not succeeding.
So that's kind of where my first question is. I ask you a lot of business advice about starting companies and, the entrepreneurial spirit. And I was wondering if there's any advice you have for listeners about starting their own company, because I know a lot of people are terrified to make that jump, and it's scary to leave your job that you work 9 to 5 at a desk and work for somebody else. I think everyone's dream is to work for themselves and make their own money.
Yeah, without a doubt, which comes with its own sets of challenges and anxieties and all of it. But it's still, if that's what you're meant to do, it's what you're meant to do. I'm definitely believing in that. But as far as, an advice I can sort of encapsulate in a way that's not too overly wordy, I would say is really understand yourself. And like, what do you really love and what are you really into? And what is that thing that's going to sustain you when it does get really hard? Because if you just start something because you think it's a good idea or it's going to sell a lot, when it gets really hard, just a good idea is not going to make you work 18 hours. It's not going to make you beg for money when you need to beg for money and you're embarrassed by that because it's like, oh, fuck, I can't believe we're out of money. I got to go raise more money or whatever it is. It's like the thing that's going to make you able to do all those really shitty things is when you really are just so passionate about what you're doing and what you're trying to put out into the world, whether it's a service or a product or whatever it is. That's what's going to make you be able to do that and not walk away. And the only way to know what that is you really have to know who you are and what you're about.
So playing devil's advocate for you. So me working in the industry or service industry, a lot of challenges I think a lot of new personal trainers and physical therapists or anyone in the health industry face is that we have this idea that we know what is best for our client and we have an agenda for each of our clients, but often that is not what the client wants to do. So being in the service industry, I think one thing that I learned is we just essentially have to give the product that the client wants and pays for. So you not being in the service industry, do you think that is just a business that provides products that people buy, that you are wholly interested in it, or you are listening to what is going on in the world and what people want in the clothes that you design now? Yeah. Versus just giving people what you want to give them.
Right. I mean, it's both, because it's a product, but it's a product performing a service, right? The service part is still in there. There's just something tangible now. So you're constantly having to listen to the customer because they're voting, right, every day. Like you look on your site, and especially now with, the last 10 years, the explosion of e-com, you don't have to go through a store. Before you were relying on your retailers and stores to tell you, oh, well, I think the customers really, you're selling a lot of this, you're selling a lot of that, but are they selling it right? There was always questions there. But now on your site, pretty immediately when something's working and when something's not, and you have to listen to that. To a point, it's a balance of like, you're trying to lead them in a direction too, just like you are, right? With our clothes and what we feel proud of. So it's a definite pull back and forth of like listening to what they're saying, but also just staying true to your vision.
So I love that. So true. And I think one thing that would be really interesting for people to hear, I know your background story, but I think it would be interesting for people to hear your background story and that, I know you didn't go to college. I know you didn't finish high school. And I know that, a lot of people think those things are necessary to be successful today. But obviously it's not the case. And I think hearing, your story, not bleat what I've just already told them, would be helpful for people to listen and like learn your process about how you started.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, and not that I would recommend this route for anybody, but just it didn't work out for me. College, because of that, college didn't work out for me. I mean, it was, I was just like kind of a bad kid. And it just took me a minute to find my footing, but there was always desire there, I think, with me. So whether that desire was, regardless of what it took to fulfill that desire. So if I took a route that might not have been the most, society didn't really view that as the way they wanted you to fulfill your desire, I did it anyway, and it got me in a lot of trouble. And then as I grew out of the desire didn't change, it was just kind of recalibrating things to go, okay, I got to figure this out now because I have a lot of desire. And how do you fulfill that? And it was just, I needed to just start working. For me, my learning, I have to be working and doing it to get it, to understand it. I just could not at that point in my life be in a classroom. I wasn't capable of doing that. I didn't have the attention for it. I wasn't advanced enough in that part of my brain to kind of really sit and learn that way. So I just, through meeting, thankfully, some great people, and I started at the bottom working on film sets and just as a PA and worked my way up into that path. And that really worked out and gave me a life. And then I got the itch to actually push the creative side of me, but I really didn't have the wherewithal or real confidence to do that in a way that I was required to do it every day. And there were stakes to do it. I would just kind of dip in and out on the creative side. And then finally I got to a point where I just saw that if I continue to dip in and out, it's never going to be the full, like I'm not going to earn my money creatively, which is something I didn't even have a specific focus of where that creativity was going to land. I just knew that I wanted to be able to use that part of me. I just didn't know what it was. So I was a real distance from figuring it out. So I quit everything I was doing. Luckily, I had saved some money and just started things and little businesses and working with people in different projects of just where it was a full creative endeavor. And for the next almost 5 years, just started and failed a lot. But I really allowed myself to go through that. And, full disclosure, I was lucky that I had set aside some money that I could fail a lot and blow through some cash and kind of put myself in a very precarious place. Just the ability to do that was a luxury, and because I had worked really hard before and put money away. But regardless, it was still scary because there was nothing coming in; it was all going out. But I just kept at it, and because you asked, how many businesses I had started. I mean, it's been countless of starting and failing and starting and failing. But I'd never done that before. I'd never really risked in that way, and then. Just through that process, I had met STAUD, who's my partner at STAUD, and then Erica, who's my partner at, and she's the head chef at Kitchen Mouse, and met them both at that tail end of that 5-year period, and met them both within a few months of each other. And then out of that, STAUD and Kitchen Mouse were born, and the minute those started to go, it was like, oh, this is what I was supposed. This is it. It really felt like, okay, this seems.
This is the sauce.
this just hit different in terms of
I
what I
love
was
that.
doing within them, dealing with them as partners. They were different. Like it just the whole thing felt like, oh, something's different about this. And that's 7 years ago with Kitchen Mouse and six with STAUD. So yeah.
So I think so many people, whether it's, being an entrepreneur and starting businesses or really anything in life, I think so some people are so afraid of failure, or when they do fail, they are too scared to continue
Yeah,
on.
it sucks.
What drove you what drove you to continue drive on?
It's just I was so unhappy. And I just knew I was never going to be happy unless I really at least swung. Because I hadn't even really swung, like taken a big swing at trying to do this thing, right? Which again was pretty like obtuse. It wasn't focused. It was like, oh, I want to be a great photographer. It wasn't like that. I just want to use the creative part of my mind and I know there's something in there. I got to figure this out. And it just came to a head of like, well, I should say it was 2009, and a few specific things did happen. That was like, okay, if I don't do this now, it's never. I'd broken up with my girlfriend after it was a 13-year relationship. A company I had been partnered in that really had just started, but I really thought was going to be the thing. But again, it wasn't a creative partnership. It was more me on the like production side of things. But I thought, man, this is going to go. And then I had ruptured a disc in my neck, all in the same year, all within the same year. So it was a lot that kind of stirred the pot of like, okay, I'm single. I don't have this love thing. How many people have, you start thinking about those things of like having perspective on when else can you do this, and being grateful that you are in a position to even fail it's a privilege, like you got to take
I love
advantage
that.
of it. Because sometimes you're just
I
forced to
think
you have kids and you have a parent to take care of, a friend you're taking care of, or who knows. And for them to be able to do that, and they still do. You hear stories like that. If I hear stories all the time of somebody fucking, who was like working 3 jobs and still started something else. I didn't have to do those things. So it was really a realization of like, if I don't do this, that's fucked up. Like I need to risk everything. And it's like, so what? And it was so I just stopped doing what I was doing on the producing side, and then just started this thing called dilettante, because I wanted dilettante, which a lot of people didn't even know what that meant, and the people that did know what it meant were like, dude, that's like a negative connotation about somebody. Like I was like, yeah, I know, I want to make it a positive thing. And dilettante was into the arts, but in a very superficial way, and I wanted to make that a positive thing. It was like turning my ADD and like all this, like, how do I turn that into a positive? And that was really what dilettante was about in the beginning of this experience. Like, how do I make my unfocus, my desire, and all these things, instead of trying to focus, how do I try to be a polymath? How do I make doing multiple things without diluting the results, or without it having results that are, dilutive? How do you make that work for me? And I'd never spent time really trying to do that.
I think the fact that all of that, and you not folding under that pressure and continuing to push on and continue to be willing to fail is such a testament to your character. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you telling me you had your first job when you were 10 and it was delivering newspapers.
10 or 11. Yeah, I had a paper up because and it wasn't even for like the most noble reasons. I would see something. Oh, I want that. I remember I went in an aquarium. Like, and I wanted fish. Like, well, I'm just going to get a paper out. And then I wanted something else. I asked them, make my paper out bigger. Like, I remember I had to go so I'd get more money because I wanted a pair of sneakers or something like that. It was just, I was like, there's a way. Like, let's just figure this out, Again, it's a
I don't
thing.
I don't think you hear about many kids doing that these days anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because do you think it's learned? Do you think it's just inherently in somebody? Do you think it's today's culture that contributes to that? And if it is, if a person wants to change, what can they do to become more like you?
Well, I definitely wouldn't recommend that, but I don't know. I will go back and say I am insanely impressed with, let's say I'm very much exposed to a Gen Z group, right? Just by virtue of having STAUD and some people at the office too. I work with 42 women, you know, of like our 45, there's like 3 guys at the office. So I get exposed to a good age range, but there's a lot of Gen Zers in there. And then just knowing of that, being aware of who's doing what out there, it's really the entrepreneurial spirit is really unbelievable and it's super impressive. And it's easy to focus on the ones that you find repulsive or tacky or like, oh, that's fucked up that they're doing that. Sure, maybe you're right, and there is that segment, but if you just look a little left or a little right, there's a whole other segment that are actually doing really interesting things and making it work for them and building these careers. And it's really impressive. Like I have to, you know, it's like, it's not easy to do that over and over, to put out content, you know, as a podcaster, like putting out content every day, it's not easy. It's very, very difficult to do it well and to do it consistently. Anybody cannot do it one thing and it hit or two. But when you're months in, you're years in, like that takes a very persistent, you know, person who's really entrepreneurial, you know? So I don't know. I do see a lot of that, the equivalent of a paper route and expanding your paper route. Now it's just done a different way. You know what I mean? And I definitely don't look back at all and the kids now and say, oh, it's so fucked up now. I think it's harder on them now because of, you know, having to navigate social media in ways, but the tools, the ones that seem to be able to use it in what the benefits of it, my mind's blown. I mean, the quality of content that I see put out by kids in their teens, just from a production value sense, blows my fucking mind. And I'm so impressed.
It's crazy.
Like, it's really inspiring. Like, it's just like, fuck, that is so good.
Yeah, I think that, to your point, that people will see the positives or negatives. They see what they want to see.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether that's being a successful entrepreneur, and to your point, like, it is hard to put out good content. You know, it can be discouraging if it doesn't catch on, but it's just that pig-headedness of like driving on, driving forward, continuing to put out content, continuing to put out your product. It's all about just, eventually you're going to get good. Eventually something's going to catch.
Because a lot of times it is just hanging in there. You don't even have to be the best. It's I mean, the whole thing about, you know, it's like, I am a perfect example of that. I truly think I am 80-20, maybe. It's maybe even 90-10 of like, motivation, work ethic out there, and then natural talent. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not even close. And so much of it is just hanging in there and doing it over and over. And people fall off. You don't know how many friends I have that are outrageously talented, but they just couldn't keep it together. You know, there's that side. So, and I think a lot of times too, when people are kind of like, oh yeah, you know, fucking TikTok or social media, whatever, and looking at that, they don't really believe that. It's their own frustration of their inability to succeed on it in that platform, and frustration with not knowing what to do with it, that then the guard goes up. And instead of like, okay, well, where can I really, and embarrassing yourself on it and doing that time to see what works and what doesn't work. And maybe you're just straight up email and you don't have to do TikTok and you don't have to do a podcast, and email's your thing or text is your thing, whatever. It's like, you got to figure it out. It's all out there for you now. So yeah, it really actually bothers me when I just hear anybody just talk, just that it's so easy to talk shit about any platform, you know, in new media.
It is. It is. It totally is.
Yeah.
So as a entrepreneur and, you know, founder of a million companies, some successful, some not.
Yeah.
It's always impressed me when people like you who have not a lot of time on their hands seemingly make health a priority. So has health always been a priority of yours? And if it hasn't, what was the impetus to start? And then, you know, how do you make time for health every day? Because I know you're a really busy guy.
Yeah. No, it definitely wasn't always, but once, you know, basically once I started Dilettante and on this sort of path to like discover what is my creative self, as lame as that sounds, but having to be
not lame at all.
What's that?
Not lame at all.
Oh, but it became very clear that I need to be in a certain state to operate at my best, right? Physically. So once I saw that, it was just like, oh yeah, I'm never going to be like my friend who can stay up all night and write an amazing song, or like someone else who drink fucking and be wasted and create a beautiful painting, or because there's that type too, and that works. That was unsadly not me. I could not, never. Anytime I had tried to do that or what, it was just so not. I need to sleep. I need to eat right. I just need to feel good to be low in anxiety and be healthy, and then I can be at my most creative for sure.
So how do you structure your day to fit all that in?
It's
or do you just do it?
No, that's honestly a big part of why I have a trainer that I have to make an appointment with, because once it's on my calendar, it's a thing, and I take that really seriously. And if I didn't, and I just did it on my own, I wish I was one of these people that's like, no, I'm going to be home and I'll put in my hour or whatever it is. Even if it was 30 minutes, I just wouldn't do it. But because I have an appointment on my calendar that I have to get to, and it just becomes another thing in my day that I need to do, and it just I don't know. You just have to schedule it in and put other things in. Just like anything else, to make it a priority, you do. Whatever you want to do, you do, ultimately, right? It's like, if you really, you have to just make the decision. And once you make the decision, for me, it's like, oh, okay, I have to schedule it. Once it's on my cal, I don't miss that many, right? It's like, I do my best. Yeah. Sometimes shit happens, but it's, it's pretty solid in there in the calendar.
Yeah, I think out of the 4 months that we've been training together, you may have canceled day of twice, and then if any other time you've canceled, we've rescheduled for another time that week. So
yeah, and
it's really, you're just making time for it.
You do, yeah. It's just committing to, number one, understanding how you operate best. For me, I know I need to do that, and it's even that high you get after, it's real for me. I don't get that from running, but I do after a workout. Like once that first hour, I'm back in the office or whatever. It's like, fuck, I'm buzzing. It's amazing. And then
I think the power of a calendar is really, really powerful. It's very strong. Like I have noticed myself when I put stuff into my calendar, I do it. If I think about doing it and it's not on my calendar, it's likely that I'm not going to get to it.
Without a doubt. And even for me, it's down to like, if I just schedule it all and put it in there, and if for whatever reason I feel a commitment, that doing that, whatever, really makes that commitment solid. And I try to keep up. Having said that, we haven't been working out that long because I fucking let it go. I omitted it from the calendar while I was starting STAUD, because it's for whatever reason, I don't know, that I let that part fall off, and I was running on pure adrenaline, and just to build this thing, and the diet maintained really good, but the physical activity was tennis here and there, a little cardio, but I didn't take it seriously, and it's night and day now. So
obviously I am handling the physical side of your health and helping you succeed in that, but you are a practitioner and follower of the carnivore diet, and I'd love to hear what your process, I mean, I already know, but I'd love for people to know about what caused you to start this, how you found out about it, and the changes in how you feel and look based on, the carnivore diet.
It started during the pandemic. I started doing a lot of research on what do we need to fight this thing, right? As opposed to it's important too, to avoid getting it. But once you do, how do you boost your immune system to be as strong as it can be?
And before you tell me about the carnivore diet and that, actually, how were you eating before?
A little bit of everything, trying to do good clean proteins, mostly fish for the protein, chicken, definitely red, not shying away from red meat, but not really leaning into that, but just, trying to keep it clean, quote unquote, and just the basics of the usual, lot of vegetables, a lot of roughage and stuff, a lot of raw vegetables too. I would, for snacks and stuff. And then, I was still eating fairly healthy, but I would have grains though. So I would eat bread. I would just, but not crazy, but a little bit of everything. I definitely wasn't hardcore in any one direction, but I would avoid junk food or fast food or, things like that.
Mhm.
And then when I started researching immunity and really looking into farming, I got into, just would get into these different wormholes. And then regenerative farming really caught my eye. And that seemed fascinating. And no, I had never heard about farming that was net negative with carbon, actually not carbon neutral, but net negative in carbon and putting more carbon into the ground than releasing it. And that was because they had animals and because they weren't monocropping and because, it was all of it. Um, and then started really digging into meat and how we evolved. Like that, let's really go back and like realizing, oh, we were eating the entire animal, and why did we just stop eating the entire animal? And what does that mean that we didn't get organs and seed oils? And just really went into that wormhole and all of it. And I don't know what attracted me the most with this idea of regenerative farming, eating an entire animal, all the and what really focusing on organs and marrow and blood and understanding. It's like, well, what has that done to us? Because it hasn't been that long that we haven't been eating that. We were doing that a lot longer than we haven't been doing it, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the state of things from the obesity rates in this country, and just you don't even need to see data, you just walk around any time there's a group of adults, it's a sight for sore eyes in the wealthiest country in the world, right? It's like, what is going on? And I don't buy for a second that all these people just can't give a fuck, or all these people aren't lazy. It is just the way shit is set up right now. It's like you're set up to fail, and it is a luxury not. And that's what's sad. Like the mean of things.
It is sad.
The mean of things is the easiest thing to do is eat like shit. And that's what's fucked up. You would want, no, the easiest thing to do is eat okay. You're fine, not like literal garbage. And of course that affects poor people of color the most. And it's really sad. So as I started looking, and fortunately being in a place that I can eat well, grass-fed, grass-finished meat and organs from a cow seem to be the most highly dense nutrient available to your body of anything, and really the kindest of all things. And this is somebody, Kitchen Mouse is a vegan plus egg restaurant and company, although we cater everything, full, but the cafe is vegan plus egg. So, I used to be I was vegan for a bit. I used to, this whole factory farming, which obviously is horrible and stuff, but it wasn't the eating meat that what I really landed on for me. It's not killing an animal and eating it. It's that process of what it's turned into that's disgusting and despicable. But this process of farming, you hear these farmers talk about cycles of life, and you realize, well, we've been doing this for over 1 million years. Hunting and eating animals. There's a reason, and when we couldn't eat an animal, that's when we ate non-animal things and vegetables, and that's only when we failed at a hunt. So that seemed to me, it's like, well, let's start there. Like, let's how I feel with that. What is the most basic, primordial way of eating, and then build and add from there. So that's what I did pretty early on in the pandemic, and started with a lot of heart, liver, and beef, and then a lot of fruit, and then really looking at the vegetables that seem to make sense. I am a big fan of, I don't necessarily like his method or the way he puts himself out in the world, but like Paul Saldano, that kind of viewpoint of like generally things they want to survive, so they're gonna have defense mechanisms in order to survive. So seeds, they're not going to want you to eat their seeds. Probably don't eat seeds. So maybe that's wrong, maybe that's right 100%, but let's eliminate it for now. That makes logical sense to me. A thing is not going, unless it wants you to poop it out, right? To spread it around. Yeah. But to actually eat and get it's evolutionary really doesn't make sense. They're not going to want you to do that. Plants have been around. They're really smart. They're a lot smarter than us. They've been around twice as long as us, right? So they're going to know what it takes to survive, and they're going to fight off their predators. They can't run away, so they're going to have defense mechanisms. They're not going to want you to eat them. So, and they're going to want you to eat their fruit. That's why they make them sweet. So it's just all these kind of things, and just really starting at that framework and then building from there. And that's been my journey so far. So it is tough to eat. Apart from liver, the other organs, so I take the supplements, the freeze-dried, desiccated organs every day. And then a lot
as you said, I was going to say, as you said, health is a priority these days.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if, for those of people that, don't have the privilege to, eat grass-fed, organic, fed beef, or even organic fruits and vegetables. Where would you recommend people start? Maybe if they're interested in eating a carnivore diet, or getting started on health, like where would you recommend that they look to start their journey this way?
Well, it becomes, if you go to a butcher and ask, like, stew meat is very inexpensive. That you can get actually very reasonable. So start with that. Start with stew meats. Start with less expensive cuts of meat. You can still prepare them in a way that's absolutely delicious. Some liver organs are very inexpensive. They throw that shit out. So if you go to any butcher, they'll give you a lot of that stuff. You won't even have to pay for it because they're, very inexpensive. Liver's very inexpensive. So the good news is the most nutritious parts of the animal are very inexpensive, right? Sometimes it's challenging to find if you don't go, you got to go to a butcher to get it. But, that's available to you. And then it's just keep it simple. I think it's that too. Just keep it really simple and basic and see how you feel, and then start adding things as you kind of continue. I think probably makes the most sense.
So my last question for you today is, just out of curiosity for the listeners, being on a carnivore diet, from morning to night, what do you eat?
I wake up, I have 4 eggs with pasture raised with grass-fed butter. Then for lunch, it depends, but I'll probably have some sort of, Erewhon has a great grass-fed little tri-tip, like strips that you can get. So I'll do that. And then evening will probably be either I love my ribeye, so it'll probably ribeye, and then
who doesn't love ribeye?
Ribeye, avocado. I pretty much eat avocado every day at some point, with a little olive oil and salt, and then fruit, definitely berries, some sort of fruit, and that's kind of it. And then mixed in there, maybe like simple. Some I think that's Greek yogurt too. A lot of Greek yogurt and a lot of honey.
And that's pretty simple, and pretty easy to follow. Like George said, you can start with less expensive cuts of meat. And I know George drinks A2 milk, which is a different a milk with a different lactose enzyme in it. And milk is always cheap, even the A2 milk.
Yeah.
And butter is generally really cheap. And fruit is often cheap, especially frozen fruit. So for those of you interested in starting the carnivore diet, there are ways to do it that are not expensive. Well, George, thank you so much for joining us on Fat Kid Fit Bod today. Is there any last things you want to say, or where, if people are interested in finding out more about you, where they can go to find you?
Well, if there's anybody listening, I'm assuming most of your listeners might be males, but maybe I'm wrong. But for your partners or anybody, STAUD.clothing is the website. Have a look. I'm really, really proud of it. And then Kitchen Mouse, also incredibly proud of. I'm proud of my partner, Erica, the chef, for building this thing. And we're in Highland Park and 7 years in and going strong. And it's been great. Been really, really super grateful about all of it. So it's good.
Awesome. Yeah. For what George said, when Rachel, my girlfriend, found out that I was training one of the founders of STAUD, she freaked out and was like, "Oh my God, I love that! I love their stuff. I love their clothing, their purses." So guys, there's great gifts on there for your partners. Well, George, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'll see you Monday in the gym, man, for us to get back into it.
Beautiful. Sick. All right, man.
All right,
Later.
Man. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope I have inspired and motivated you. I hope your inner fat kid is more proud of you today than they were before this. Fitness is a journey everyone should start, but no one should finish. So whether you're continuing or starting yours, I am so glad that we get to be a part of each other's. With fitness, Noah.